Hey, what's up? Welcome to the Mandatory. If you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Also, follow us on our social media channels. We're at the Mandatory TKO. If you've already been rocking with us, thank you so much. We're also on the audio side. We always give you a little bit more on the audio side. So if you're wondering what we thought about the J. Cole apology, that's on the audio side. So you got to go over there, stream it wherever you get any of your shows. But most importantly, thank you so much for rocking with us. We got lots to get into after a little bit of a slower week in boxing, I guess you could say. There's still some fights on, but lots to get into this week and some very big news as Jaron Boots Ennis has signed with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing, and he is set to take on my fellow Canadian, Cody Crowley, next. And this was a fight that we possibly thought would happen if Boots wasn't going to get Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. I think if you take a look at the rankings, Cody Crowley was next. But before we get into that fight, Bryan, your thoughts on Jaron Boots Ennis siding with Eddie Hearn's at Matchroom Boxing?
Very cool graphic, Matchroom Boxing. Give you credit for that. Very well done, tastefully done. The press release was interesting, just from the standpoint of Jaron Ennis, seeing him with Matchroom. You figure that a lot of guys would leave PBC. I thought that PBC would actually keep him, retain him, do what it takes, and not to say they didn't, but Eddie Hearn and Top Rank, they've been able to take away and pluck some of these guys who have left PBC, who are just out in the dark and waiting for things to happen. And, when Showtime Boxing leaves and there's going to be 12 cards in a year, if even that, I think it's 10 actually. And we've only gotten one and we're in April. Yeah, I don't think guys are going to want to wait around like that. So this is massive in the sport. Jaron Boots Ennis is what, the second best welterweight in the world according to most, maybe third at this point. Depends on if Errol Spence Jr. you're still putting him ahead after the Terence Crawford performance, and if you're even including him as a welterweight, being that there's rumors that his next fight might be at 154 pounds. But Eddie Hearn has basically said it already, and we'll get to this in a second. That's the matchup that they're looking for. They're looking for Jaron Boots Ennis and Terence Crawford. And we thought Terence Crawford was going to rematch Errol Spence. We thought Terence Crawford was going to jump to 154, do this, that, and the third. And it looks like you sort of scan all of boxing in the 154 and 147 pound divisions. Terence Crawford's best option is probably Jaron Boots Ennis. So Boots Ennis is going to fight against Cody Crowley first, who we interviewed on the show. You should go check that out. It was actually one of my favorites. But we're expecting that he's going to be the underdog in that fight, and then Boots Ennis will take care of business, and then we'll see. I'm not counting out Cody Crowley because I think he could actually make that fight a little bit more difficult than people expect. But Jaron Boots Ennis should win that fight and then progress onward. And I hope that he does get the Terence Crawford fight wherever it is. Don't care if it's on DAZN. Don't care if it's on Amazon. I would care if it's on what was that thing, BLK Prime that sort of came and went. Yeah,
Is
don't
that
put
still a thing?
I
That's still
don't
a
think
thing.
so. Don't put that shit on there. Don't put it on Triller. Yeah, don't do that. But
If it's
that's the
Eddie
fight I
Hearn's
want.
if it's Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing, it will
It's
definitely
the
be on
zone.
DAZN.
Yeah.
So, not everyone's favorite, but when I first saw this, I thought right away, well, the path has to obviously be Terence Bud Crawford, because if you're signing to Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing at 147 pounds, you're not having too many options. Do you fight Conor Benn? Do you then fight Giasov, who's undefeated as well?
The
Right?
Conor Ben, look, if Terence Crawford takes another route and then Boots Ennis fights Conor Ben, I don't
Not
hate that.
bad.
I don't hate that.
Not bad at all, but I mean, those are his options, and they're not like the best options. And then there's already talk
Right.
about Jaron Boots Ennis moving up to 154. So when I took a look at the welterweight division, I was like, not so many options there. So obviously the path was Terence Bud Crawford, kind of a free agent. He fights where he wants to fight. He does his own business after leaving Top Rank. So of course they are aiming for Bud Crawford to fight Jaron Boots Ennis. And that was a fight initially that Bud was saying that he didn't believe there was any money in. So if Jaron Boots Ennis has a very stellar performance against Cody Crowley, and that's not to say that's going to happen for sure, because we have seen some questionable Boots performances as well, but that's the only matchup that I would be looking forward to. And I think that's the matchup that boxing fans would like to see, because other than that, not so entertaining. I mean, Conor Benn, I think, still has a lot to prove in boxing, but that's a fight I think people would be interested in. Now, the biggest question is, since Jaron Boots Ennis is going to stay busy, fight Cody Crowley, are we only going to see Terence Bud Crawford fight Boots? Like, don't you think he should have a tune-up or a fight in between? So who does Bud fight in between them? Because he's getting older, and a layoff could be harmful if his next fight is going to be a guy like Boots who's very skilled. So that would be my next question to you, Bryan, is if everything gets official with Cody Crowley and Jaron Boots Ennis, and we get a date, and we know that he's going to have a tune-up before potentially fighting Terence Bud Crawford, what does Bud do in the meantime in between that? Because that would be an extremely long layoff.
I think what probably happens is because Boots Ennis is fighting in the intermediate and he'd be defending his title once or twice before the next Terence Crawford fight, or before he fights Terence Crawford eventually. We'll call it 2025 for the purposes of this conversation, in which he'll be older. I think that almost guarantees, or should guarantee, that that fight between Boots Ennis and Terence Crawford will be at 154. So I think Terence Crawford probably fights somebody in the intermediate at that weight class. I'm not sure if it's, if it's Tim Tszyu after the loss of Sebastian Fundora. Does he jump the line and fight Sebastian Fundora because, the WBO situation and, them making shit complicated with titles? And you also have like other options. Is he going to fight, any of the champions there? Is he going to actually get Erickson Lubin? Is it going to be Jermell Charlo? We circle back to that. I don't know. But I do think that if Boots Ennis is fighting Cody Crowley, which is expected to happen at some point this year, either the end of spring or early summer, we'll call it. Yeah, Terence Crawford hasn't fought since last summer, so he needs to fight within the next few months. And then if Terence Crawford is going to fight Boots after that, I don't think it's going to be December. I think it's probably going to be early 2025. So yeah, I think Terence Crawford definitely moves up to 154 as an educated guess, because he's basically said, like, listen, I want to be at 154. 147 is a tough cut, blah, blah, blah. And I just think he wants to sort of conquer another weight class on the way out, which he's already done at 135, 140, and 147.
Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable. But also, I believe Sebastian Fundora isn't going to be fighting for a little while. They're saying that he's going to take some time before his
That's
next
right.
fight.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point, I was thinking, well, if Fundora won, hey, if Bud wants to go against Fundora, that could be a very interesting fight. And I remember on Twitter, Spence was like, hey, I'm up next type thing. And Bud was like, hey, you got to wait your turn. So, but that's a fight that potentially won't happen for a while because Fundora is going to take some time off. And the whole Tim Tszyu thing, I don't know if that's a great matchup for Tim Tszyu after losing to Fundora to fight a Terence Bud Crawford. I don't know how that, does for him, right? That could be another loss on his record if he potentially fought Bud Crawford.
So Terence Crawford also, he can do what he wants at this point. I wonder if Golden Boy and Matchroom aren't the same, but they're both under the Zone banner, so they've made fights happen before. We may actually talk about one in a little bit. I'd be intrigued by Terence Crawford versus Virgil Ortiz. I'd be intrigued by that.
I think it's the same thing, though. I don't think Bud wants to fight a
I'm
Virgil
sure he doesn't,
Ortiz
but like
or a
if we're talking about he needs to stay active and he's running out of options.
That's a
I
little bit more of a riskier fight, though, because I still think at one point, remember, we were saying that Jaron Boots Ennis and Virgil Ortiz were going to be the next kings up in the division, right? These guys were poised to be up next. So I think that's more of a riskier fight for Bud. I think Bud just wants to make the money fights, like he said. So I don't know if he's going to want to fight a guy like Virgil Ortiz. I think he still wants to look for where the money is. You know what I mean? And I do agree, like 154 is maybe where he should look, but where's the money in that fight?
But that's the thing. I don't. What's the money fight here? Sebastian Fundora won a title. I wouldn't call him a money fight, and he's not going to fight anytime soon. Tim Tszyu just lost, so I don't know how much of a money fight that is. Erickson Lubin, is that really more of a money fight than Virgil Ortiz at this point? Depending
Danny,
on.
yeah,
Hmm.
that's a good fight.
That's a
That
pretty good.
that's a
No,
sneaky,
the
sneaky good
problem
fight. You know that, and
the
we ain't seen
problem
Danny in
the
the ring for a
the
little
problem
while
with
now.
the Danny Garcia one is he's also had a long layoff because we haven't seen him since last was July at this point.
Yeah,
And Well, actually, no, I don't think it was last July. I think it was just July
The July
before that.
before. It's been
Yeah.
a
So it's
long, long time.
2022.
Because he
You
made
know,
his
like
debut at 154, and then we haven't seen him since.
the money fights would probably be guys like Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman, who have had these long ass layoffs. Keith Thurman was supposed to fight or last month and he got hurt. It's really to say, like, if he's looking for a money fight in and around 147, 154, there's not a lot of money fights here. The biggest money fight is honestly probably just running it back with Errol Spence, which that doesn't look like it's going to happen, nor probably should it. And if you're looking at other options in and around these weight classes, like, I actually think Virgil Ortiz makes financial sense more than a lot of these other dudes that we're talking about. And I, as a consumer, would like to see Terence Crawford actually fight one of the young dudes, kind of like what Felix Trinidad and Fernando Vargas did a long time ago. Like, I actually would like to see that. Floyd Mayweather did that, before he ended up retiring with
He
Canelo
did it with Canelo,
Alvarez.
yeah.
Right. Like, we've seen guys do that. Like, I'd actually like to see an example of that. But business wise, does it make sense for him? I'm not sure. I also don't know what exactly he's looking for, because in terms of money fights, there's not a ton here. The big money fight for Crawford at this point is probably Boots Ennis.
I would hope so. I would hope that he would think that would be a draw, but I also think that's more of a fight for boxing nerds. I don't know if casual fans would buy into that fight as much. Do you think they would? Do you think casual fans would want to pay for a pay-per-view for Bud Crawford and Jaron Boots Ennis? I know we would. I know we would
Yeah,
have a fight party for it, but do you think casual fans would?
I think they're getting more accustomed to Boots Ennis a little bit, but he still hasn't even he main evented like one card in his career, like one of his own cards so far, and it was his last one. We'll see how the Cody Crowley one does. That's undoubtedly going to be a main event. Eddie Hearn's talking about putting it in Philadelphia. I think that's strategic.
Ooh, I
That's
love
where
that.
he's from. Obviously, that'd be great. I wonder if it's going to be the 2300 arena, the former ECW arena, or is it going to be like the basketball arena where the Sixers play, which I don't know if it's still Wells Fargo.
Wells
It's
Fargo,
definitely
yeah.
it's definitely not Wachovia Center. You know what I'm saying? Like, these arenas change names all the time because of sponsorships. But I think, yeah, I think that will be interesting. But there's honestly not a ton of like actual money fighters in the sport. Is the real overarching sort of thing about this, right? And
And in that division as well, when you take a look at the division, there's only those couple of names that are extremely known as superstars.
Yeah,
So
like
there's only so many ways.
Terence Crawford, you're the money fighter. Like, you're the money fighter. Whoever you fight, you're gonna make a lot. You might make a couple million more fighting this person as opposed to this person, but it's Terence Crawford. He's still gonna get what, 8 figures or so to fight.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And we ended up talking about Bud Crawford more than Jerome Boots Ennis because we kind of see Jerome Boots Ennis' path and who he wants to fight. Quickly, before we move on to the next subject, though, him and Cody Crowley, how good of a fight do you think this is?
Cody Crowley is one of the best contenders at welterweight that Jerron Boots Ennis could probably fight right now. Now, Cody Crowley's going to have a little bit of a long layoff, but I think Boots Ennis, this is going to be a tricky challenger for him. I would say Cody Crowley is probably his stiffest test so far. I think that might not even be much
It
of a
would
debate.
be his toughest test for sure. And I think all this kind of shows a different light on PBC, to be honest with you. Not that many fights. That move to Amazon has really slowed down things, and I think that's a big story within all of this as well, because I would have thought they would have kept Jerron Boots Ennis as well, but they weren't able to, and Eddie Hearn signs another big name boxer, and looks like we're getting more fights on DAZN. But here at the Mandatory, we want to know what you think about Jerron Boots Ennis signing with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing, who you think he should fight, and who you think Bud should fight in between the time where Jerron Boots Ennis fights a guy like Cody Crowley, and what you think about that fight. So please drop your comments. Let us know. Also, hit that like and subscribe button if you like the content.